Welcome everybody to WPC Plus. That is the weighted pod created where we talk fantasy baseball to help you prepare for draft season, which is pretty much here. I'm Pierre Camus. He is Nick Gaut, and let's talk about some hitters that might be undervalued heading into 2021. We're going to compare the recent ATC projections that were updated with ADP and see which hitters might be a bargain on draft day. We're going to start with a guy that we've talked a lot about all the past season, before the season. We're going to continue to talk about Marcel Ozuna because we both love him. And back with Atlanta, no DH, but clearly they didn't care. They got a spot for him. So are we going to expect more of the same? I mean, really, MVP caliber Ozuna? Is it going to be that same level of production over what should be a full season? Because I don't see how it's possible for a guy who was clearly one of the front runners for MVP to be undervalued. So how is that even possible?
I don't know. I guess people don't believe. They should believe 2020 because it happened in 2019. Like we've talked before, the only thing that slowed down, that stopped Marcel Ozuna in 2019 was that he broke three fingers on one of his hands, and it completely tanked his batting average, even though it didn't tank his exit velocities. And his numbers in 2020 were as good or better as they were in 2019, and there's not a lot of red flags. It's you talked about ATC's projections. They have him for 33 home runs, 87 runs scored, 102 RBI, four stolen bases, 281 average, uh, making him the number 21 overall earner, the number 18 hitter. And there's just we talked a lot about his how just go to his baseball savant page and bask in all the red. And if you want to go a little bit deeper than that, we talk a lot. I look a lot at different ranges of exit velocity. Not just hard hit percent, not just max exit velocity, but going a little deeper. And Ozuna, looking at the different exit velocity metrics, his barrel rate increased for the third year in a row, 10.4%. 2018, 13% in 2019, 15.5% in 2020. His max exit velocity went up again. His average exit velocity on fly balls went up slightly from 2019 to 2020. Same on his balls hit in the air at over 100 miles per hour, an excellent predictor of future power. It was 45% in 2019. It was 45.1% in 2020. Like we've seen the same Marcel Ozuna a couple times now. He didn't have he didn't have the broken fingers that he had from 2019 and 2020, and suddenly put it all together, and he's, like you said, an MVP candidate. He's going back to my one worry with Ozuna was that he'd be leaving the cushy lineup and cushy stadium of the Atlanta Braves. And now he re-signed with them. He's going back to the same lineup. It's a great hitting park, and hitting in the same lineup as two of the best hitters in baseball, in Freddie Freeman and Ron Lacuna Jr., and then just like Ozzy Albies and Travis d'Arnaud just kind of lingering around him too. That's an awesome lineup. Ozuna hits the ball incredibly hard and has been doing it for a couple of years. I'll take his ADP of around 50. Like whatever. I'm I'm happy to draft him much higher, and I'm at that draft price. I'm going to have him probably on just as many teams as I had last year, which was all of them.
Yeah, hopefully that would be a nice haul. One thing I will say, I think maybe this will correct a little bit just because he was technically a free agent up until this past week. So we might see that climb a little bit now that people know he's back in Atlanta,
Yeah,
same cushy lineup like you said. So it could be part of that, playing into the factor. I also think part of it, it's what he's not. We already know what he is, which is a really good hitter. It's just the only thing is what he's missing is he doesn't steal bases, and he's not a starting pitcher. It's starting pitchers,
Yeah.
their ADP has climbed so much, it's pushing some of these, elite or borderline elite hitters down just by
hmm
default. So that's the only thing. Like, no, he's not going to help you, with the steals. So a guy like Mondesi, who we may or may not talk about on one of these episodes, he's going to go higher. Just the fact that he could lead the league in steals, and Ozuna, even though he could very well lead the league in RBIs and be among the leaders in home runs and have a really high average, and every other category, he's just not going to steal bases. So, forget him. All
Yeah,
right, let's
me
go a
too.
little further down now. A guy that I know we both agree on, and this was even before he signed. Oh, I'm sorry, he didn't sign. He got traded to go to Washington, and that's Josh Bell. Look, I had Josh Bell on my TGFBI team last year. Did not work out too well. I basically won in spite of him, not because of him. I thought he was a really great pick at the time. But he has left the black hole of the Pittsburgh Pirates lineup. Washington, maybe not what they were a couple of years ago, but still, that's definitely an improvement. But I like him anyways, just because regression had to happen, didn't it?
There's a lot of like things going against Bell last year, and not all of them were like, for one, just like a general baseball. Like the Pirates were terrible. We've seen kind of good players struggle on really bad teams like the Pirates before, and so he's playing in this terrible lineup. They're not winning at all. His ballpark is is just a killer against left-handers. You kind of tell in the beginning of the year he was trying to do too much. His strikeout, he's always had great plate discipline, and it just went out the window. Like he seemed to be pressing, like he was trying to win everything by himself and be home run hitter Josh Bell, and just kind of looked lost at the plate. And you get him out of Pittsburgh, better line, obviously better lineup, better ballpark, obviously. You go from hitting in the same lineup, Brian Reynolds and Kevin Newman to Trey Turner and Juan Soto. So that is just a tiny upgrade. And like looking at his, going back to like his exit velocities, they weren't horrible. Like they took a dip, but they didn't take like monstrous dips. We talked about uh, average exit velocities, uh, you know, or percent of balls in the air that you hit over 100 miles per hour. He was at 38%. He was at 29% in 2018, 38% in 2019. He was up to 43.6% in 2020. Even though you look at his, this is why I like to look at these different segments. You look at a lot of people look at just the average exit velocity of your fly balls, and you look at that for Bell, and it's super scary. It was 95.6 miles per hour in 2019 and 90.1 miles per hour in 2020. So you look at that and be like, oh man, power is on its way down. But then when you look at those, percent of balls hit over 100 miles per hour, and you see he actually went up 5 points, you're like, okay, well that's not nearly as scary. So I just, combination of that stuff, the better lineup, the better ballpark, and just a draft price, an ADP past 180. It's like people have tanked on Josh Bell. Like they are. I guess a lot of people got burned by him last year because that is a far bigger drop than I think he deserves. So yeah, he's a first baseman I love. After pick 150.
Oh yeah, and I'll say I got burned by him last year, but I don't care. I'm still in because
Going back.
I mean, why not? And he's only what I think 28 years old. It's
Yeah.
not like this is a guy who's not still in his prime. I mean, the change of scenery alone is inspiring. But also notice that as the year went on, the last couple of weeks, he was starting to show signs of improvement.
hmm
And so this is a case where I really think he would have kind of figured things out had we had more time. So love definitely Bell at that ADP. Another first baseman, let's stick there, that I don't understand why it's so low. We were talking earlier about Rhys Hoskins. I think maybe the fact that he had this elbow surgery maybe scared some people off, but he should be good to go for spring training. You're thinking maybe it's more a matter of just perception. It's like, why hasn't he turned into the next Babe Ruth yet? Is what we thought he was going to be when he first came up. I mean, what? Just expectations are too high still, or people kind of bummed out from a couple of years ago when they drafted him too high. What's the deal with Hoskins? Why is he every year? It seems like being undervalued.
I, I think that's what happened. I think people, I've never forgiven him for not being the Rhys Hoskins that he was in like his first 50 games or whatever when he came up and just hit every ball out of the park. It was just, and then people overdrafted him the next year thinking he was going to be a top 10 player. And I guess they just haven't recovered because, we talked earlier. This was the same. It was the same thing last year. Like I had Hoskins on a bunch of teams last year, and it looks like I'm going to have him on a bunch of teams this year at his 160 ADP. Looking at his ATC likes him for 30 home runs, 84 runs, 84 RBI. You're 239 average, but you're getting that with Hoskins. Like a 240 average isn't that bad and today, like it's manageable in today's game. And just looking at he didn't have a bad 2020. He looking at his home run rate, he hit you know 0.054 home runs per plate appearance. That's up from 0.041 in 2019, and even up from 2018 when it was 0.052. No, it's not the 0.085 that it was in 2017, but that's what we were talking about. Like, I guess people are still are going to be mad if he doesn't hit a home run every 8 plate appearances. But look at his exit velocities. He had a 15.1% barrel rate in 2020. It's up from 10.8% in 2019. 12.7% in 2018. His overall hard hit rate was up 5 points in 2020. His average exit velocity was up a mile per hour. His max exit velocity was about the same as it's always been. He had a better year in 2020, and people are just like, nah, no Rhys Hoskins. I'm still mad at you. That's from 2018. So we're gonna keep you at your 160 ADP. Like, he just seems one of those guys that I know what I'm getting with Hoskins, and I think he can pretty easily get to like close to top 100 value, and going at 160, like I'm happy to fill him in on my rosters.
Yeah, and I just grabbed him in the DC draft. I got him, I think, pick 172 or something overall. I, I was thrilled with that. Look, if you're waiting first base, because we know at first base, there's those top two tiers, there are a few guys, and then there's a big drop off, right? Or there's some risk at least. So if you're waiting on first base, this is the perfect choice, other than Josh Bell, of course. And look at the comparison. Okay, I know the average isn't great, but it's first base. You're looking for power, right? Not necessarily average if you're not getting one of those top couple guys like a Freddie Freeman. Look at Matt Olson. He's going at 90 overall. He's projected to hit for 238, which might even be generous based on how he did last year. Going to
Yeah.
get to 200. Okay, projected to hit more home runs. Yeah, but is the gap in the home runs that much bigger when Hoskins is projected to score 84 runs, which is more than Olson, and 84 RBIs and runs? We can't take him for granted, but I mean, in the Phillies lineup as opposed to the A's lineup, you can't ignore that either. That's another factor. So, yeah, give me Hoskins at, twice the ADP range. I'll take him over Olson any day, really.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so let's move on here and talk about another similar range guy. That's Jorge Soler. Same concept here. We know we're getting power, not a high average. So what makes him undervalued? Well, he kind of had a disappointing 2020. So here's the question, the obvious question. What are you believing in? 2019, where he exploded, or 2020, where he disappointed? Obviously, the answer is probably somewhere in between, but it looks like people are kind of leaning more, at least early drafters, leaning more towards the latter, where they think that he's just never going to get to that, 40 plus homer range again.
Yeah, not me. I'm believing 2019. For one, he dealt with an oblique injury for over a month, like kind of in and out the lineup. I think he did hit the IL at some point, but it's like they, they talked about it during the season. They talked about it after the season. Like the oblique messed with him quite a bit, and he never really felt full strength. And going back again to the exit velocities, there wasn't a lot of difference in 2019 big time power breakout Jorge Soler and 2020 hurt oblique Jorge Soler. His barrel rate 98th percentile in 2019, 98th percentile in 2020. His his maximum exit velocity was 93rd percentile. It went down all the way down to the 89th percentile in 2020. His balls hitting the air at 100 miles per hour or greater. He was in the 96th percentile in 2019. He was in the 100th percentile in 2020. He was still hitting he was still hitting the ball crazy hard, and he was hurt, and that made him a lot worse. Like, things aren't always that simple, and this probably isn't that simple, but it's kind of like a similar situation we were talking about with Marcel Ozuna when his average got totally sapped by a handful of broken fingers in 2019. A different situation with an oblique, but it took up like a large chunk of his abbreviated season. He was playing hurt, but his exit velocities were still bonkers. So yeah, I'm kind of valuing Soler where as far as like upside goes, where I had him going into 2020, and I'm happy to collect the big ADP discount that we're getting because he played hurt.
Yeah, and of course, every injury, going to be magnified because, like I said, missing 10 games, that's a huge chunk of the season when it's only 60, even if that's what it was. But in an oblique, that'll definitely sap your power. And a similar situation here, Anthony Santander, Baltimore, was just ripping it up. At one point, leading the majors in RBIs and tied for the league in home runs, but then he got hurt late in the season. He's still in Baltimore, unfortunately. There's been some trade rumors, not sure what's going to happen there. But even so, this guy looks like maybe young upcoming version of Soler. He's got the power. He's going to be hitting in a prominent spot in the lineup. If he stays in Baltimore, if he goes to another team, that might even be better, depending on where it would be. But um, is it because people just don't want Orioles on their team, or do you think we're believing that he isn't a true breakout? This is just a small sample. He just had a hot streak, and just kind of dismissing it.
Yeah, I think it's probably a combination. Like, lesser known players on bad teams can carry more value because there's no playing time concerns. I know that Santander's going to bat in the middle of that order, and I know he's going to play every single day. And but putting all that to the side, I think the skills were for real. He had excellent, not like crazy, like we were talking with Soler, like not talking about like his exit velocities, but his barrel rate was in the 68th percentile, was up from the 52nd percentile. His max exit velocity was at the 87th percentile, up from the 72nd. His fly ball average exit velocity, 66th, up from the 33rd. Like, not crazy numbers, but not elite exit velocity, but made an elite leap from what he had been before. And he's in his like physical prime, playing every day in the middle of the order on in a bandbox stadium in a good hitting division. Like, these are just a bunch. This seems like easy money to me, just because like hit the ball hard in a tiny ballpark and good things tend to happen. So once again, he's one of these outfielders in this range that I'm happy to take the discount because I think they got knocked down because of who they play for and ending the season injured.
Absolutely, those are the type of players you want to target, kind of those middle to late rounds. And then one last bonus name here, a guy we have to mention, and that's Yaz, the grandson of Yaz. You, I think, said something to the effect a couple weeks ago that you're going to have him in almost every single draft, if possible. What do you love about him so much? Because I know Giants are kind of one of these teams too that probably aren't going to excite a lot of fantasy managers, but there's still going to be a lot of production here.
It's the you know, I think I tweeted that or said that after because I was in the middle of two draft champions drafts at the same time, and both of them I got him at around like I think the joke I made was if his ADP if I'm not gonna be able to pass him up at pick 140 in any draft that I'm doing. Like, and that's true. Anytime Yastrzemski is sitting, if I'm picking around 140 and Yastrzemski is sitting there, I find it hard to believe that I will be able to pass him up. Uh, he's been very good, and he's been very good for like he was really good for partial 2019 season two, and then carried it right over into 2020. ATC has him as a pretty good value. They have him, overall at 108. Uh, so that's a good value anyway. And this once again goes back to kind of lesser known players on teams whose offense you're maybe not paying attention to. Like uh, San Francisco's an above average offense. Like they're not anything special, but they'll be like average, maybe a little bit better ish. But Yastrzemski is going to, by all indications, bat leadoff. And when you bat leadoff every day for an average offense, you're going to end up with somewhere close to 700 plate appearances. That's the high side. Like it's hard to reach 700, but I think we've talked about this before. I think people really underestimate just how many plate appearances you're going to rack up if you're leading off every day. And I think that's what Yastrzemski's going to do. So I think it starts with that, and it's he is an all around, like he's an all around player. He's going to give you category production everywhere. Not like extreme in any category, and only a handful of stolen bases, but he's not going to kill you. It's a lot of value for I think Yastrzemski's what people just aren't going to believe it because he hasn't done it for quite long enough. Like a lot of these guys who we've talked about that did it in 2019, but because they weren't able to do it for a full season in 2020, then we're going to doubt him again. I think that's what's going to happen with Yastrzemski, is that people want to see him do it again in 2021, and fine. I think next year he's going to be a top 100 pick pretty easy because people will find. I think he should be a top 100 pick this year, but people just aren't going to give him the credit yet. So I'll take that 50 pick discount this year.
Yeah, and one thing too that's important to note, if he is sitting at the top of the lineup, people just look at the home runs and maybe the RBIs, right? And he's not a guy who's going to be a big stolen base threat, but the fact that he is going to be at the top of the lineup is going to boost his run scoring ability. And runs is a category that people just kind of tend to overlook, right? Because harder to predict, and I get that, but still, that's another area where he's going to produce maybe above some of the competition that's going ahead of him in terms of draft position.
Yeah, and just looking real quick at, so he came up midway and started playing midway in 2019, and then played all year this year. So combined in 2019, okay, fine, don't trust the small sample of 2020, but since he's came up, he has 636 plate appearances, 31 home runs, 90 RBIs, a 281 average, and 103 runs scored. That's been since he's came up, he's basically played like a full season. 636 plate appearances, not quite a full season, and it's plus 30 home runs, 90 RBIs, plus 100 runs scored, 280 average. Is that something you might be interested in at pick 140, 150? Because I am.
Absolutely. And that's the thing. You score over 100 runs this season. Not saying he's going to do it, but I mean, look what he's shown so far. He's definitely capable of getting close to that at the very least. All right. Well, there you go. We have some other names, but You're going to have to read about it in our upcoming articles talking about some more undervalued hitters at RotoBaller. Check out our work. Nick always crunches the numbers to find out the best draft targets for you guys in the preseason. Thanks for watching.